Oh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Swingman podcast. It is podcast number 106. As ever, I'm your host, George St. Ledger, joined as I am all the time by Louis Halpin and Lewis Howard. And we are right in the midst of the NBA Finals now. The Warriors are one win away from taking it all. But, I mean, we're gonna jump straight into it. And we'll start off with the thing that, Louis, you coined. It's not that easy being green. Take us away.
Well, there's two sides of being not that easy being green, which is my little double entendre that I came up with. Obviously, there's the green man on the Golden State Warriors. He's not actually green. His name is just Draymond Green. But, the Boston Celtics are famously robed in their green outfits. And it's looking a bit rough for them at the moment, you would say. Obviously, you've put it pretty much as plainly as it is. They're one loss away from losing the NBA Finals. And I think that last loss was pretty discouraging, considering Steph Curry didn't even have himself really a gamer at all. I mean, made none of his shots really, which he had been in the previous ones. You could explain away some of those losses they'd had in the previous ones with, what can you do to stop Steph Curry when he's going like that? But yesterday, it wasn't like that whatsoever, and they still didn't manage to get themselves over the line. So I think they'll be pretty worried in the Boston Celtics camp at the moment. Not too worried because, they've been in this situation before. Milwaukee, they were one game away from elimination there. Same with Miami as well. They played the game 7. So they're used to being backed in a corner. And it feels like, apart from the Nets series, which I think may need a bit of a retrospective considering what we've seen from the Celtics since, how easy they found that series is kind of alarming for Brooklyn, I think. I think this Boston team is kind of better when they've got their backs against the wall as opposed to when they're being the ones to push it a little bit. And I think that might be where that inexperience comes in that we mentioned last podcast and kind of throughout, really. There are some concerns. I think offensively, you're looking quite squarely at Jason Tatum at the moment, who hasn't been managing to get it going at all during this finals. And, there's other parts to it as well. Jaylen Brown was really bad last game, but he's been decent throughout the rest of the games in the finals. Marcus Smart. But I think when it comes down to it, Jason Tatum's been doing well in terms of playmaking, drawing doubles and dishing it out and defending. But if he's not going to score to the level of which we know he can do, they're not going to win the series.
Yep, I agree with you. I think the loss they just had is the worst one of the lot because, as you say, there's so many things that went right in that game for them where if you looked at them, you'd think, oh, yeah, the Celtics have got that one done. They're going to be one win away from winning it all. You see Steph, I think it's the first time in like 3 or 4 years he hasn't made a 3-point shot in a game. You look at they out-rebounded them. I think they doubled their offensive rebounds. I mean, you take all into that account, you think, oh, there must have been a Celtics win. But obviously that's not what happened. And you've got to look at a few things. One big thing, I think, is the bench points. The Warriors got 31 points from their bench. Jordan Poole hit some shots. Gary Payton hit some shots. And then you look at the Celtics bench and they got 10 from theirs. That's a big disparity. You look at the turnovers, and that's one thing I said before this series started. The Celtics had 18 turnovers in that game, and they were just throwing the ball away sometimes. And I think that's where you see some of the downfall of having, and I'm not trying to single him out and say he's a bad player, and he's obviously a fantastic player, but some of the downfall of having someone like Marcus Smart at point guard. They need someone who can facilitate that offense a little bit more at times. I think they definitely needed it yesterday. There was too much ISO ball, and there was just too many times they were just careless with the ball. And you add that all up, as well as a monster game from Wiggins, which we'll get into later, and the Celtics just ended up with the loss.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately boils down to the fact of that the Warriors, if you're going to come up against them on a night where Steph Curry is 0-9 from 3 and Andrew Wiggins is 0-6, I mean, even though Andrew Wiggins was good, Andrew Wiggins was 0-6 from 3. You've got to win that game in an NBA Finals. There's no excuses around it. So. The Celtics will be kicking themselves, but like you said, Louis, I think that they like being the sort of the underdogs in the stories at the minute. I know it's obviously that everything around the Boston Celtics in the NBA would not scream underdogs normally, but especially in this country, I think the whole thing around it was the Warriors going into it. they sort of like this mentality. They like their backs up against the wall. So, I mean, either of you two, you're currently looking cushy at Game 7 predictions. I was blown out of it. Sort of Game 1, I was done after that first loss. So, but yeah, that's where we are with it. But we'll move on to the award-winning Curry. Bit of a funny one to talk about after his performance last night. But the NBA Finals is not based on one game. He can be allowed that one game after what he does primarily for this Golden State team. I mean, are we really talking about anybody else for NBA Finals MVP apart from Steph Curry if the Warriors win it?
For me, the question is, even if they don't win it, should he still get it? Because you look at his numbers compared to the whole Celtics team's numbers, and if you were to pick out, who was the best player in that series, everyone would pick Steph. They probably wouldn't pick anyone on that Celtics team. So the only way I see it not happening is either one, the Celtics do win, and you just go with that rule of you have to give it to the best player on the team that won, not on a guy that lost, or Andrew Wiggins goes for 40 points in the next game or the next two games, and maybe that throws it up a little bit. But personally, I don't think there's anything that anyone else on the Warriors can do to take a Finals MVP away from Steph if he does. The Warriors do manage to clinch the title, and I would say as well, I think probably owed one from the first win for the Warriors dynasty when Iggy won it, because although putting Iggy into that series did change the series, flip it on its head and give the Warriors an advantage, at the end of the day, Steph was the best player on that Warriors team when they won it in 2015. So,
yeah, I would like if the Finals MVP, or we had the Western Conference Finals MVP, which is a bit of a Mickey Mouse trophy, to be actually decided as the best player in the series rather than the best player on the team. But I mean, so I'm kind of okay with Iguodala having that one, even though I do think people don't really comprehend the gravity Steph brings in terms of like the spacing. Like he becomes like the most important player in that team just because of that. But in any case, in this particular final series, I would agree. If the Warriors win this, there's absolutely no contest that he's going to be winning the Finals MVP. I mean, that game on the road in Boston, they go down 3-1 if they lose that game. And what he done to just put that team on his back when, let's just say, some of the other players aren't really consistently producing their offensive performances. I mean, this isn't the same Warriors team as it was before. You're not getting consistent stuff out of Clay. Jordan Poole is kind of all over the place a little bit. And I think my statement from last podcast where I said Draymond Green is a non-factor offensively has been kind of brought out as correct a little bit, because
I don't think you're going to get much criticism against it.
No, because I mean I get that he does the pass and he's good in the open court, get the rebound and push it, but I quite enjoyed the move that he done in the last game where it looked like he was going to do the dribble handoff and like he actually drove to the basket, because people were absolutely like gobsmacked that he'd actually done it, because he'd actually taken a shot. I was like, oh, maybe this is just a ruse he's been setting up for this like game in the finals for the later stages. But Steph has really had to do a lot of offensive carrying, apart from obviously last game where the second best player in this series, I think Andrew Wiggins, really came through. So undeniably, I wouldn't give it to him if they lose a series. I don't really like that personally. I'd never give it to someone who's lost a series, even if I thought they were the best player in the series personally. But this is like a legacy cementing thing, I guess, because people always bring it up that he hasn't won a Finals MVP, which I think is kind of unfair. But this is what he needed to sort of elevate himself into. We had him on the sort of like 12th, 13th. I can't remember when we done our top 20 players of all time. This will put him top 10 if he wins it here, and quite firmly in it as well.
Oh, you think he's firmly in top 10 if he wins it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oof. That might be a conversation for another day then.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, the last person that won, I mean, Jerry West is the only person that's won a Finals MVP, right, on the losing side.
On the losing side.
Else. He is. Yeah.
And I think that also came against the Celtics. So it'd be quite fitting if that happened twice to them of Steph Curry getting it. But I'd normally agree with you, Louis. I do think that a Finals MVP should go to someone on the winning side. But I mean, unless I'm seeing 35, 40 point games or just general like gamers from Jason Tatum, I can't really see how they'd give it to someone else other than
It would
Steph.
be Jaylen Brown if Boston Celtics won.
But I mean, regardless of it, it does normally go to sort of the main guy of the team if we're going to go down that route. So I think it's more. I'd be quite surprised if the Celtics won and it didn't end up in Tatum's hands, but we'll wait and see. Who knows? But we'll stay on the finals anyway because we have to talk about it from Game 5 last night. Andrew Wiggins just absolutely dominated in terms of what he was doing, and he just took over the game when Steph wasn't there. Normally it's a Warriors loss, but Andrew Wiggins decided, no, it's not. I'm an NBA All-Star for a reason, is what he said. Came out Minnesota Timberwolves style. No, it must have been a tear down your eye as you saw the number one pick balling it up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got a soft spot for Wiggs always. I think what he brings to this Warriors team, which they just sorely needed after the Game 3 loss, was just that athleticism, that youth, which, I think after that third game, you were looking at the Golden State Warriors and think, is this team a bit too old, too battered, to not athletic enough basically to keep up with this young Celtics team, which is something we talked about before the podcast. And, I think Stephen A. Smith was calling for, Kuminga, Moses Moody, some of the younger guys to come in, which I didn't think was a bad shout. But throwing some rookies into this series after not playing for the rest of it is quite a substantial jump up. So they kind of needed Wiggins to go in there and be that guy that gets the rebounds, that brings the energy on the perimeter defense, and he's done exactly that. And then he's obviously contributed defensively. So, I think he always had it in him. I always thought he had it in him because he's just a freak athlete at the end of the day. It was just about I think it was more of a mentality thing, and there's something I can't measure. I don't know it was that, but just to see him sort of be at home in a final series makes me think, those guys on the Warriors, they've had some impact on him. So it's quite nice to see.
Yeah, and I think it's really impressive from Wiggins because, as you say before, this isn't the Warriors teams of old. And before we got into the playoffs, people were hyping up, that three-pronged attack of Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole. But really, in this finals, by far, Andrew Wiggins has been the second best player on that Warriors team. Clay has hit timely three-pointers, had some good moments, but he's been inconsistent. Jordan Poole's been wildly inconsistent. But Wiggins was that guy, especially in the last game, obviously, when Steph didn't have the greatest game, to step up and be able to help push them over the line and get them to the position they are now, which is one game away from winning it all.
Yeah, I mean, this was what Andrew Wiggins was essentially what the Warriors could have ever hoped for him to do. Of a night where Clay's not at it, Steph's not at it, they need that third option. And I mean, if there's ever going to be a time to do it, it was a Game 5 when you needed it, and boy did he deliver. So, I think it was a good win because when they picked him up anyway, there were lots of teams that would have saw that as just almost a contract dump. That was his sort of value then, and you get a few stars around you. Look what you can do to a talented young kid. So, no, it's good to see in that regard. So it's good to see. I mean, that's really me for the NBA Finals currently. Have either of you two got anything else that you want to sort of talk about from it?
I just want to say it will be a pretty raucous atmosphere for Game 6. I mean, Boston there's been a few conversations, a few accusations thrown out from the Warriors playing staff. They're not happy with the F-bombs being thrown
the language
in
front of the kids.
How dare they? Think of the children. But it's just, I don't get it with basketball players. Maybe it's because we're in this country and we know the abuse and vitriol from the stands is quite significantly higher than they're used to in the America. They've got a different sort of threshold. But they've got to be expecting that coming into the next game. And I think Steve Kerr, a couple of players have been like, yeah, we're happy for Steph sort of coming off a really bad game because they know he's going to be angry next game or a little bit frustrated, which, I saw a little bit of that in Game 4. I thought he came out with some real sort of determination, just shimmy into the fans. that type of thing. So I think it'll be it's last ditch for Boston. They'll be going all out, and Jason Tatum has to come for it.
But I mean, after there's no way after especially it's not really a backlash that they got, but in terms of a shooting game like the Warriors had, Boston Celtics, the players in there are going to be so angry they didn't win that game and take a home court back. But I can't see the way I'm saying. I can't see anything else in this going Game 7 now. I mean, famous me to jinx it here, but I just can't see a way in which that it isn't going Game 7 after it all of it.
All right.
So.
I will argue against that. I think the Warriors.
You think it's
next
done?
Game. Yeah. From what I've seen from the Celtics, especially in the fourth quarters of games, I think they do their youth and inexperience comes out a little bit, and they get a bit desperate. And what worries me in the next game is that that'll show again, and they'll almost like when you watch Jaylen Brown sometimes, and he tries to get the team going again by really pushing it, and sometimes he just does it a bit too much, and he's a bit careless with it and throws the ball away. I think that is like a microcosm of the entire Boston team and how they react to those situations so far in this finals. I think that's happened quite a bit. So I'm worried with their back up against the wall, they might try and force it a bit too much, go back to all those ISO plays, and that'll lead to the turnovers starting to creep up again. So unless they can really sort that out, which they can, but I just don't believe it's going to happen. I think the Warriors will finish it. I think that last game you can only react to those sort of moments in one of two ways, but I just think it will be the negative way for the Celtics, and the Warriors will be able to get it done.
It's quite it's been quite a dramatic shift from the Celtics, because I felt like they could sort of trust about 8-9 guys in the rotation, really. And now it feels like it's just reducing every single time. I mean, has anyone seen Grant Williams for the last two series? I mean, since he absolutely nailed the Milwaukee Bucks in Game 7, I've not seen sort of head or toe of the guy. So that's been another factor. But it's just Jason Tatum for me, and I don't want to harp on it too much, because I do think he's doing some good things. I don't think it's been an overall disaster class, but he needs to get that scoring up. I mean, when they won Game 3, he shot terribly, but he got about 27 points and 9 assists, and that was really enough for the win. And obviously, Jaylen Brown went off in that game as well. Jaylen Brown's been their most consistent offensive player this series. They just need one game from Jason Tatum, I think. And I think they'll push it to Game 7. I don't feel confident they're going to win the whole thing now, I've got to say.
Yeah, that's the only thing. The Warriors' experience of this situation now is where it will become more paramount than ever. But I just think in the Garden, the atmosphere is going to be a bit... I don't know. It can go both ways, though. If they start terribly, the atmosphere in there could get quite bad quite quickly, and then it's a tumble.
The thing is, they've not been that good at home
exactly.
the entire playoffs, which is quite strange, considering you'd think that'd be one of their big advantages. But maybe it does go against them slightly. Who knows? They just bottle a lot of stuff, to be honest. That I think that youth is quite an apparent factor, but that's just speculation, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see for it. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you want to talk about on the finals? I mean, we'll be talking about it when it finishes anyway. So yeah, that'll be it for it. Now, Louis, you wanted to discuss some of the NBA draft that's coming up. Orlando's Magic Man was the quip that you gave me. Where do you want to go with this one?
Well, I was just thinking, we've only got about a week or so to the NBA draft. Comes around pretty quick, you would say, after, we're kind of tired from the finals, and then you get into the NBA draft, and then it's free agency. 365 sport these days, as they say quite often. But I'm aware that we have quite a large Orlando Magic contingent here in the UK. For some reason, I need that explained to me. I don't know why the Orlando Magic caught such a fan base here in the UK.
It could be. It's probably the generation from it. I know Orlando Magic fans UK on Twitter. They're very big on Twitter, so I've seen that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But they've got the number one pick in the draft, obviously, first time in a long time, and I do think there's some intriguing prospects that round out mainly. I think the top three is kind of decided at this stage. You got big Chet Holmgren, who is the guy I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure if either of you have seen any of this guy or if
I
you've
have,
had
yeah.
a look. So I think the sort of buzz is they might be picking him at number one. Quite a I mean, like I can see the real upside of him because he's really lanky. He's a really good shot blocker. Offensively, I mean, he's like power forward, centre-ish. You'd probably pay him power forward because of a reason I'm going to get into. But like offensive ceiling, very, very high. Defensive ceiling, pretty good as well. The only thing is, I'm not sure if I got the exact combine sort of weight up or anything like that. But he is so skinny. Has anyone actually seen him?
No,
He's
I've
very
not.
slim.
This is the first year I've not been really paying attention to any of the draft picks that have come out from it.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. And it's just difficult for me to sort of not comprehend selecting him because I see like the real upside in him, and I think he could be like a genuine like unicorn in the league. I think that term's used quite heavily, but at the same time, I've never seen someone built like him actually be a success in the league. It's really quite strange.
I mean, I'm imagining sort of Porzingis vibes the way you've almost described him, but
Porzingis coming into the league. Porzingis is kind of built now, to be fair to him.
Yeah, he's strong now.
Yeah, I'd say Porzingis coming into the league is a fair comparison for his body. Some elements of his game, although he's a better playmaker than Porzingis ever has been and ever will be. And, you know, he's a good shooter, really good handle, everything like that. But I just can't imagine throwing him into like a league against adults where he's playing against other power forward centers. I'm not sure if anyone else. I mean, I know you don't really, George, but if you had any other opinions in regard to.
Yeah, what I've seen, I've looked at a few mock drafts, and I've seen a lot of Jabari Smith Jr. being the one that people think are going to go to the Magic. And I think considering who the Magic have on their roster, that one makes more sense. But as you say, when you look at, there's always that argument about who's got the highest ceiling. And I think Chet is the one with the highest ceiling. Yeah. But as you say, he is very slim. He will definitely have to put on some weight when he's in the NBA. And I know a few people say, people said that about Kevin Durant, and I've seen a couple of the Kevin Durant comparisons being made. We want to make it very clear this guy is not at the level of Kevin Durant. When we're saying his ceiling can be very high. It's not Kevin Durant levels of high. Kevin Durant is a once in a generation player, but he does have all of the offensive and defensive skills, especially if he puts that weight on to succeed in the center position as well, especially if he puts the weight on in the modern NBA. And I think that's what everyone is so excited about. The only thing I'd say as well is I think in a couple of the games in college when he came up against tougher opposition, his numbers went down quite a bit. So that might be cause for caution for some. But I think the ceiling's just so high that even if Orlando did take him number one, it might be a surprise for a few people, considering what most of the mock drafts have said. But I don't think you could argue with the what the NBA teams think he could be.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about Jabari Smith Jr. I actually looked at him and Paolo Banchero. I'm not sure how to. Yeah, Banchero, and I thought Paolo Banchero looked a little better actually, but. Yeah, I suppose it depends on the sort of age-old do you draft in terms of need, in terms of what you've already got on your team. If you're a bad team, like the Orlando Magic are, sorry to the Orlando Magic UK contingent, or do you just draft on who you think is going to be like the best player?
Yeah,
it's a risky one. It's a risky one. I think I would go safe with a number one overall pick and I'd go for Paolo or Jabari Smith Jr. But I would also try and find out who the Oklahoma City Thunder want, because I know Sam Presti high in the draft. He's a bit of a hit merchant.
Yeah, I think OKC, if if Chet isn't taken number one. I think they 100% hit.
Yeah, I
take
think
him
they're
as
going to
number two
take him
pick.
as
I think
well.
as I said before, I mean, looking with how the teams are constructed, I think he is a perfect fit for that up and coming OKC team.
Yeah.
And you talked about Paolo Banchero and Jabari Smith Jr. and comparing them. I think it really depends on what you need for your team, because Smith Jr. is one of the best shooters and 3-point shooters, especially coming out of the draft that we've seen. But Banchero offers that playmaking and ball handling. So I think that all comes down to fit, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, both of those guys, 6'10", versatile. Those are the type of guys that would be hanging in the finals we're talking about a couple minutes ago. That's why I lean more in that direction over someone like Chet, because I mean, if you look at the record of sort of finals MVPs in the last 20 or so years, there's not many big men. There's not many centers. They're big wings, and you could count Giannis as a center, I guess, and stuff like that. But those are the guys that make the impacts because they got the size and the skill to sort of get whatever shot they want and then defend really well. So
yeah,
that's why I'd lean in that direction. But I do. Chet intrigues me, and I'll be tuning into any game he's playing for whoever he's playing for next year.
Yeah, I would say, I know we've had this conversation before, and I am fully on the side of Giannis is not a forward. He is a big man. He's just
he is
unbelievably
center, really.
special. Yeah, he's just so unique from everyone else in the league that he's in his own category, really.
Yeah, I mean, a big contribution from me on the NBA draft side.
So, well, we've got some time. A couple of weeks we can do a bit of a retrospective.
Oh yeah,
maybe
when it comes around, I'll be all for it. Just a minute, I've just been NBA finals. That's been that's my excuse anyway. So, but no, we'll round it up. Donovan Mitchell to South Beach. So it wouldn't be a Miami Heat off season if there wasn't at least a Donovan Mitchell rumor floating about. And there is one more than ever because obviously of the Utah Jazz's season, the Miami Heat season, and most notably recently the viral pictures that were put up by Jimmy Butler and Donovan Mitchell and Chris Brickley and the like. So do you think this is sort of now a match made in heaven for both of them? The Jazz need to change something. I know that Donovan Mitchell isn't the part of that side that they want to change, but the Heat need that extra star. The Jazz need a reset. It seems sort of now that sort of the moons are aligning. Or do you think that this is again just more Miami Heat off-season trade rumors for Donovan Mitchell?
Well, I know the new Jazz owner has said that he wants to build on what they've got, which basically is him saying he wants Donovan Mitchell to stay, obviously. But just going off what we've seen from an outside perspective, I do think Donovan Mitchell probably wants to move. And I actually think of the teams that have been rumoured, the Heat can probably offer the best package for him around Tyler Hero, multiple first rounders and some other players. And, you look at other teams that have been linked, I don't think the Knicks can offer a package equal to that. Whether it'll actually happen, I don't know. Miami have got to pay a lot of people in the offseason. I think when you break it down, they can make it work, but I would say it's unlikely, and that is also going in with the Bradley Beal rumors as well. I think all of these are unlikely, but they are possible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree the moons are aligning. Whether they want to give up Donovan Mitchell, because I agree if you're going to build forward, that's the guy you're kind of going to want to build with. But it just depends on what you can actually get for the other guys. I don't think, I've seen them in a few trade rumors, I must admit, but I don't think anyone's screaming the doors down to pay Rudy Gobert that amount of money that Utah Jazz are paying him. So they might be forced into it, and we've seen if a player wants to get out of a certain situation, out of a certain team, doesn't matter really how much they have on their contract, they can get out of it, basically. We saw James Harden do it twice in a year. So it's really not that difficult anymore, and he feels a direct need for the Miami Heat. And I do think, I'm not sure if either of you two saw Pat Riley he done like a end of season press conference after they got dumped out by the Celtics, and he was talking about how they need people who can get shots without needing screens, who can do it isolation wise, who can produce offensively and not be a liability defensively, which seems kind of a pointed criticism at a couple players, if I'm quite honest. And I'm not sure Donovan Mitchell was exactly lighting it up on the defensive end of the floor either, but I think it's something you'd probably sacrifice for the 26 points you'd probably get in from him on the other end. So yeah, they're in desperate need of some offense. I mean, I saw a stat just yesterday actually, and it was the sort of top 10 scoring duos in the playoffs this season. And there was no Miami Heat duo on there. And Jimmy Butler had averaged 27 points in the playoffs. So that kind of tells you all you need to know really about that. That man needs some help desperately. He needs someone to sort of carry the burden as well in the regular season. He's getting old. He gets injured quite a lot. He needs to save his sort of legs for the postseason. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Miami Heat, whether the Utah Jazz take a package, which I do think is probably the best. I agree with you, Lewis, but it's not great still to me. But if he wants out, he'll get out, and that's probably, you just take the best available opportunity then, really, don't you?
Yeah, ultimately that's it. It's a player power league 99 times out of 100 at the moment. So, I mean, I can't understand why he'd want to leave Salt Lake City for South Beach, Florida. But yeah, apart from that, I'd be, especially after the post, like Jimmy Butler knows what he's doing. There's always a little thing around that. So there's always an inside thing for it. So at the minute, I'm leaning more on that. I'll be surprised if this doesn't happen. But they'll be in talks all year long to try and get the best deal out of it. Because, I mean, do you think that if the Jazz do end up losing Donovan Mitchell, they're going to then try and shift Rudy Gobert and go for a full reset?
Yeah, I think that
get rid of some of their other pieces.
Yeah, no, and I've seen a couple Gobert trade rumors. You know, I think Mavericks was one of the teams mentioned with him. But then I also saw, who is it? There was another center that the Hawks were kind of more focused on DeAndre Ayton in the sort of free agency. That's who their type of targeting, be a bit cheaper, a bit younger, you know, a bit more sort of molded around their team a little bit. So I'm not sure what they're going to get for Rudy Gobert. Admittedly, it's not a position I want to pay £200 million for, $200 million, especially when you're kind of limited offensively. But I think it'll just be a full-scale blow up if they're taking away Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean that's it for me. I certainly wouldn't want to be going around with Rudy Gobert as your definite main piece. So yeah, I mean that's it from me. Louis, do you have anything else you want to tack on?
No, I think that's everything.
Yep, all good.
Right, well, I mean, we'll be back after Game 7, if there is a Game 7. We'll be back to discuss the NBA Finals, break that all down, and discuss, some of the... we'll discuss some more about the off-season rumours. It doesn't stop there for the NBA. It never does. As Louis said earlier, it is a 365 sport. And on that note, we will end it there. Thank you very much for listening. Make sure you're following us on all of our socials, at Swingman Pod. Make sure you're following us wherever you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow, and also give us a like. It would help us out more than you know, and a review and things like that. So yeah, check out our website www.swingmanpod.com, and yeah, that's everything. Enjoy the rest of the NBA Finals, and we'll catch you after that. Thank you very much for listening. Peace.